What story does is it really does impact our brains. It really does make us emotionally intelligent. It changes the way that we see things because we get to step into different roles and try them out. People who do helicopter stories tell me that they get to know their children better than ever. You see the things they care about, but you also see the fears and the things they're exposed to.
Hello!
Hello!
And welcome to episode something of the Tiny Chair podcast with me, Matt, and you, Julia.
Wait, introducing us again? I love that. We do that every so often, don't we? Remind people who we are.
That's a good idea. And who have we got on the podcast this week, Julia?
We have the amazing Trisha Lee here to talk to us about helicopter stories. Now, it's not stories about helicopters, although technically, I suppose it could be. It could be. But there is a little treat for the listeners at the end when we try a helicopter story of our own. So you have to stay tuned for that to find out what they are and what on earth Matt ends up making me do.
Very, very excited about that. That is going to be a good use of 5 minutes of my time.
I am less excited about that.
Should we get right into it and say hi to Trisha?
Oh, let's go. Let's go.
All right.
Matthew, would you introduce our guest, please?
I would absolutely love to. So, Trisha Lee is the founder and artistic director of Make Believe Arts, a theatre and education company, and the charity behind Helicopter Stories. More on those in a moment, and lots more on those in a moment. Very excited about that. Trisha created Make Believe Arts in 2002 based on the idea that story has the power to change lives, which I think we can definitely all agree with. She is a writer, she's a speaker, she's a trainer, and a trained secondary school drama teacher, although now the children she works with are mostly in the early years, which is good news for the Tiny Chair podcast. Trisha achieved a master's in writing for young children. You can find loads of her books and on her website and in the bookshelf behind her, I'm sure, and has now worked in the early years sector for 24 years. Trisha, welcome to the Tiny Chair podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I'm really excited to be here.
Did we get anything wrong in the intro there? Julia normally likes a little fact check in the intro in case we get anything incorrect.
No. I think that was all good. It's funny, the secondary school teacher, that just feels like such a long time ago, such another lifetime. But yeah, no, I don't hear that one often. But yes, that is. I mean, I'm trained in theatre and then ended up going into secondary school for a while. But when I found early years, I stayed there. I'm all early years now, not, I don't work with older children.
I love that. Once you're in the early years, you don't look back. I completely agree with that. Julia, should we get underway?
Oh, I think so. So we like to start the podcast with something that we call an early years ick. So not something that's sort of damaging or dangerous, but something that maybe you see in settings or some practice that you think, oh, I wish we could get rid of that. So do you have an early years ick to share?
Yeah, I think my early years ick is when I hear people saying, oh, we didn't have time for story today. And I just sort of go, sorry? You know what I mean? It's almost like we didn't have time to breathe today. We didn't have time to actually do what I would say is probably the thing that is the most important thing that we can do with children daily. And I just sort of feel like, for me, and I hear it so often, oh, we haven't got time to do a story. Oh, we'll do that another time. There isn't time for that. And I feel like we don't see the value of it. And that's why it's so easy to go and dismiss it in that way.
I'm surprised that anybody could even avoid it. Like, if you spend any time in an early years setting, a child will come up to you and thrust a book into your hand and usually plonk themselves down on your lap, and you read, if nothing else. I'm surprised people are saying there isn't time. How are they?
Where do you think that comes from, Trisha? Do you think it's maybe lack of confidence sometimes, or do you think it's just getting so caught up in all the other things that need to get done in the busy day that we forget to make time for it? Like, when you do see that, where do you think it comes from?
I think it comes from getting caught up in all the other things and not seeing that as something and realising that that's not happening. And, there is the, going along, but actually just sharing a story with the whole group, with actually just enjoying doing that. And yeah, it's that thing of, oh, we're just too busy. And I do hear it. And it just makes me really sad of, we can't say that, I think.
There is always time. What a start. Completely agree.
Now, to go with our early years ick, we also like to have our guests choose an early years pick. So if there was something you could pick to drop into all early years settings, maybe apart from helicopter stories, what might that be?
I think for me, it would be getting children acting out stories, not just helicopter stories, but actually, I think in early years, we're brilliant at messy play. We're brilliant at messy stuff. We know that early years is messy, but I do think where we struggle sometimes is the acting side, is that because acting can feel messy too, and acting can be chaotic, and we might lose control, and children might get overexcited, and for me, in Vivian Gussin-Paley's classroom, Vivian, who was the person who created storytelling and story acting, in her classroom, she acted out everything. They'd act out nursery rhymes, they'd act out stories, they'd get children up and actually stepping into stories in that way. So if I was going to have one thing that I felt like should be in our practice, alongside all the wonderful things that are in our practice, it's very much, let's get children acting out. Let's actually stand them out and get them pretending to be dinosaurs or pretending to be Humpty Dumpty or, sort of those things that can add a whole other layer to children's experiences.
I will love it. Great start. And what a great little teaser, I think, for the main thrust of the podcast where we're going to dive into all of this stuff. I love it. Before we get there, we like to start off with a bit of a quick fire round. To get our listeners to get to know you a little bit more, Trisha. So to start with, Trisha, what does a great day look like for you?
It's interesting. Vivian Gussin-Paley says a day without stories is a disconnected day. And I almost kind of feel that. So the great day is a day with stories. And for me, one of the things that I do is I spend one morning a week in a class, in a reception classroom, working with children, and I make sure I do that as part of my practice, and I do that to stay connected. And that is a great day where we're doing poems, we're acting out stories, the children are telling stories and they're acting them out, and where you feel connected, where you know that you and the children are playing together and being together in that's for me is my best days. And they're Monday mornings. I mean, I have them, sort of, that's when I look forward to my time in the classroom with children.
I love that. It's nothing like looking forward to a Monday morning. That's a sign of a job you love, right? Looking forward to kind of getting in there and starting the week.
Do you look forward to Monday mornings, Julia?
Well, I mean, I have Mondays off, so that's the wrong question. Tuesday mornings, yes. I look forward to Tuesday morning.
Correct answer. All right, next quick fire question, Trisha. Maybe share something about the early years that would surprise someone who hasn't spent a lot of time in the sector. What do you think is kind of surprising about the work of early years that maybe someone like a politician or a minister for early years should know who maybe hasn't spent enough time in the sector?
It's how rich children's imagination is, and that I think it was the thing that surprised me. I mean, we talked a little bit about, sort of my training being in secondary and in drama, and really believing in drama and the power of story and all of those wonderful things. And then somebody said, do you want to do primary, year 5 and 6? And I was like, well, I could cope with primary. They're probably all right. And then slowly somebody went, well, how about year 3? And then I went in early years, and the thing that really surprised me was going, they get it. Where I sort of I think what happens is children arrive with all this richness and curiosity and wanting to understand and experience the world. And then we school that out of them. So all of those, sort of by the time children get to year 7, they can be too cool for school. But actually, there's something so wonderful about the early years because they're ready, they're with you, they want to learn, they want to kind of experience things. And I mean, that's a gift. That really is a gift. And it's so scary that we try and shut that down by trying to formalize that or go, how can they need to say this properly, they need to write, it's all the things they need, rather than actually turning that on the head and go, all the wonderful things that they have, that they do. And I think that's for me what I'd want politicians to see, is the wonder of that, of what children can do, not what they can't.
You know, this reminds me. I'm lucky to be here with my partner's family, and her brother has a. He's I think he's 6 at the moment, and we had this amazing discussion yesterday because he needed to disinfect his foot because he had a splinter come out, and he was, what is disinfecting and how does it work? And then my partner said, well, actually, I need to go and disinfect my baby bottles, you know, for our newborn. And he's like, how does that work? It's like, well, you put them in the microwave. What? And he's like, should we put your foot in the microwave? No, don't put my foot in, you know. And suddenly we're having this discussion about science and hot and cold and germs. But just when you were talking there about how wonderful early is because the children are so ready to learn, I just thought about that moment because that's such a great example of that curiosity that maybe sadly we lose as we get a bit older.
And I think that science thing that you're saying is really right. It's very scientific. And creativity and science are really strongly linked in that way of children want to know, and that constant asking of questions is amazing. That's what scientists do. It's sort of, I remember my son going, where do butterflies live? And you suddenly go, I don't know, actually. You know, and actually the way they think makes us have to re-question how we see the world. And I mean, that's beautiful. That's why I'm in early years. That's why secondary's gone.
A Tiny Chair podcast classic now. What's the funniest thing that a child has said to you?
Gosh, I get funny things all the time. I really do. Because obviously I'm scribing their stories. So I actually like verbatim. So there's one I really like, which was a girl who told her story. And her story was, Red Riding Hood, Red Riding Hood, Red Riding Hood. And so I wrote it all down. And then I said, oh, are you going to be Red Riding Hood when we act it out? And she went, no, I want to be the monkey. And I'm like,
obviously.
where's the monkey? And it's all like, yeah, okay, is there a monkey in your story? Okay. And I think it's that of going, and she looked at me like, why didn't I know that there was a monkey in this story? But, you know, so she's playing with those words, which is, it was almost like she loved the words and the flavour of the words in her mouth, but she really wanted to be the monkey. And, you know, but there was another one as well, which was a boy who'd been off sick for a while. And he came back in and his story was, boy sick. I just sort of go, I do a lot of E's and Y's. But I actually didn't need to, because as soon as he was on the stage doing that, he's able to do, you know, like sort of a massive acting out Oscar-winning performance of projectile vomiting.
Yeah, that one feels like you can move it into the physical quite quickly. I'm confident in your ability to move that one into the physical. But let's get started then, seeing as what a wonderful segue, I think, into our discussion on helicopter stories. Maybe, Trisha, just to start us off for our listeners who are like, yep, stories, check, got that. Yep, acting, got that. What on earth is a helicopter story? I've never even heard of them before. Give our listeners a little introduction into helicopter stories and what they are to you.
So helicopter stories is based on the work of an American practitioner, Vivian Gussin-Paley, who was an incredible woman. And she's written numerous books, 13 books. She died in 2019, age 90. And she was my friend and my mentor. And we wrote to each other over a period of 20 years. We monthly exchanged letters to each other. Well, she'd write letters to me and I'd send emails to her. So I'd get these beautiful letters in the post, talking about story and sharing all of that. And what Vivian believed was that actually every child has a story, and how we can support children to share those stories within the community. And Vivian was a real fan of theatre and really loved the theatre. So she did all of that, getting her class to act out stories. And but she was acting out other stories, like, you know, sort of known stories, traditional tales, all sorts of things. And then one day she tried what it would be like to act out the story a child had told. And initially it started, you know, child does a picture, what's the story of the picture? So she just took one of those and got the children acting it out, and suddenly there were queues of children wanting to act out their stories and wanting her to tell a story to her so she could act them out. And it's a really simple approach. It literally is that. A child tells you their story, you write it down verbatim, exactly as they say it, and then the whole class or the whole group gathers together and acts that story out. And it literally is as simple as that. The layers and the complexity of it are more about how child-centered it is, how much the ethos is embedded in what is a story. You know, a story can be boy sick. Bleh. We know that story. You know, I don't need to say any more. You understand that as a story. You don't have to go, well, tell me, and were you in bed? And what was your temperature like? We don't need all of that.
Or the classic Red Riding Hood and the Monkey, another classic story that we all know so well. Can I ask then, so I think also such a touching tribute also to your friend, Trisha, and I'd love to dive more into kind of Vivian's legacy later on, but maybe as a starting point, it was lovely you telling the story of her realization of what this could be. Tell us a little bit about your realization the first few times you tried this in your practice and what you found.
So what was really interesting is, because I come from a theatre background, not an education background, in theatre we don't borrow. In education, we borrow all the time. In theatre, we don't. You have to make sure you've got permission. And that actually is why I had this relationship with Vivian. So I read her book. Somebody handed it to me and said, oh, you might like this. It's you do that theatre thing. You might find this interesting. And it just was amazing. I mean, it completely changed my life. And then I wanted to try it. But if I'd have been in education, I'd have just tried it. But because I worked in theatre, I had to get permission. So I wrote to Vivian, I found her and managed to write to her. And that's how we began. So I had access to Vivian. We were sending messages to each other. I could call her. She's from America, but she came to London. She happened to be here and we met. And then I went into settings and I found it was interesting, but I felt like a story thief. I felt like I was going around trying to find, come on, tell me, is that a story? And then I got invited to America to watch Vivian doing it. And I sat there and I watched what she was doing and I was like, this is so different to how even though I had all of that, I'd interpreted what she was doing differently to her, and that's why it wasn't working. I didn't act out every story. I mean, my shame, I still have the curse of all these unacted stories because the children would remember and they'd be going, can we do mine? And I'd be like, but we don't have time. The reason I didn't act out every story was because I did rehearsals of the story, because I'm from a theatre background, you know, I mean, so I was like, we have to get this and let's try moving like this and, you know, sort of. And I watched Vivian.
Let's think about the second act. Yeah.
Did one of you just mention Macbeth?
Totally. And so I kind of saw Vivian and it was just such a wake-up call. I was there with her. She was in Indianapolis doing some filming and I was there with her for 3 days while she was working in this setting. And I was literally taking notes and my whole practice changed in that moment. And I came back and I just went, we're not doing it like this anymore. This has to change. We have to do this differently. And it was very much what she'd do is accepting everything that children said, was literally we start acting it out immediately. Children, and I still see this with some practitioners where they feel they need to read the story first that a child's told and then begin the acting out. Children don't need that. Play isn't like that. Children don't sit down and go, let's plan this bit of play. How are we going to do this? They just start and then they'll stop in the middle and go, you be the mummy. The mummy's got to go to the shops, and they'll actually stage direct alongside that. And I think for me, that's what I've learnt about it, watching Vivian, is that her practice, she refined it over years, but that by working in that way, she actually made it so close to what children do in play that it works for every child. And I really believe that. We've been working we've been doing a lot of work with SEND, children with SEND, and actually, and children, EAL children, that actually this approach works for all children because it meets children where they are. It's not trying to go, this is what the story should be. It's going, what's your story? And children have just been waiting to be asked that. The minute you ask that question, it's like, oh, yes, they've connected. It's, so it's brilliant.
I mean, it's just the fundamentals of child-centered and child-focused. Like, that was what I was thinking when you were talking at the end there. Like, if that's not about the unique child, then I don't know what is. You are starting with the child in kind of its purest form.
Yeah, and there's such a joy in that. I think that's the thing. It's so joyful when you have that. I mean, you sort of said earlier, what's a good day for me? And it's because I never know. I don't go. You could say to me, oh, Trish, there's a group of kids waiting out, some children out there. Can you go and do some helicopter stories with them? I don't need prep. When I did my drama lessons, I had to work out and all of that. I can literally do it because it's not about me. It's about them.
Yes, I would love to dive into a bit more why it's so essential to scribe exactly as the child has said it or how they've pronounced it, because there's obviously that temptation as an educator to kind of go in and be like, oh crumbs, no, that's not how you say that. Why is it so important that we use just the child's own words?
I think there's a few things. I think one is agency, that they're not being corrected. And there are different opinions on this. I'm very pure Vivian. But the pure Vivian approach would be that actually by writing that, what we're doing is we're valuing the child's words, but also the cadence, the rhythm of the way that children speak. We actually really listen to them. And it's quite special, that, I think. And also that what begins to happen is children will self-correct. And, where they're adding on an extra ED, I goed to the shop, they hear me say it back and then they self-correct. So, they are hearing their story exactly as it said. Let me read you. I've got a story here, which to me sort of...
yes, please.
It sort of sums up some of this grammar stuff. And this is from a book that we created called The Woman Who Cooked Everything.
That's not me then.
Okay, so this is the story. And this was by a 4-year-old called Bethany. Once upon a time, there was a girl, and the girl was very married.
I'm sure there's some listeners out there who know what it means to be very married. Yeah.
Beautiful, isn't it? Very married is just like...
almost to a fault, one might say.
It's so beautiful, isn't it? Very married. But also it could be positive or it could be negative. It's like, oh, God, I'm very married. Or it could be, I'm very married. Mm. Which one are you, Julia?
Maybe a little from column A, a little from column B.
That's very married.
Yeah, very married.
And she danced to the music with her Maria. And then there was a big bad wolf sneaking while she was dancing. And then they looked behind them, and then they saw the wolf, and the wolf gobbled them up. And then they was alive again. And then they went home, and then they saw a broken chair. So much they liked the broken chair, it broke into little pieces. And they then sitted on their new settee.
It's perfect. It's the perfect story. It's
I love it. What a roller coaster.
But it's so much, there's so much grammar that's wrong in that, but it's so beautiful. And you kind of go, I don't care.
Also, it's not that you don't understand it. Like, you know exactly what Bethany's talking about. I'm there with the girl and the Maria and the broken chair. And, it's very like... You can follow along. It doesn't matter that, maybe there's a few letters out of place.
Yeah, and actually, if you were correcting that, I kind of go, where do you start? Whereas actually, I don't need to worry about any of that. I don't even need to think, the girl was very married. Can you be very married? Well, we've agreed you can. It's poetic, isn't it? But actually, if I had my grammar head on, I might be going, how do we change that? And I'd have to be as I was scribing her story, I'd have to be constantly trying to analyse the grammar rather than just go, tell me, and see the beauty of it.
I think that's a really powerful point, because like the instinct is, well, I should probably change sitted to being sat, right? Because that's wrong, you know. But actually, to your point, it's first poetic, and we don't do that. Like, you read Shakespeare, the grammar to our modern ear is weird, right? But you wouldn't necessarily say it's somehow any less poetic as a result of that. And I think I kind of like your approach of saying, well, if I have to start changing sitted to sat, then do I have to do something with very married? And then before long, the whole thing has become a completely different version of what it was. I think that's a really, really interesting reflection about, like, this is not the place for them to learn the perfect past participle, basically.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And I think it's about whose story is it? But also those EDs are kind of a correct grammar rule anyway, aren't they? They're following a rule. They've just got it in. I walked, I talked. If I sew, I'm a sewer. If you kind of have these, but you're married to somebody, they're your marrier. That's not correct, but it makes sense that they're your marrier. It's a better word than husband or wife as well. So I think that's it. I think there's a logic to what children are doing. But also when we act it out, I will read the girl seated on the new settee. Can I see you sitting? And I say then, sort of instinctively when I'm asking for the action, I'm modelling correct grammar then. And I think people do struggle with it. And some people will kind of go sat and just do it slowly and change it. But for me, I think you've got an amazing record. I mean, we talk about, how do we sort of baseline and, look at children. And I go, you just do their stories. You've got a record of where they are in their language development because you've written it down. You know where their EDs extra are. You know when they're getting their she's and their he's muddled up because you've scribed that story and you kind of know that was there. It was a story I got told on Monday, actually, by a girl. When I was walking, I saw a princess and I went with her. She asked me that I'm beautiful. And I love that. She asked me that I'm beautiful. And I know that probably she means she told me that I'm beautiful. But actually, she asked me that I'm beautiful. Am I beautiful? Do you know what I mean? It sort of layers a whole other meaning on there as well. And there's something just so poetic in children learning language and how they use language and the way they're choosing that I just think if you corrected it, you'd lose some of that beauty.
I love that. I think it's so powerful, and I completely, I think you're so right that you might get one thing, but you might lose something else, which is the kind of the poetry of what they're trying to communicate. I think I'm totally on board. Trisha, do you ever in your practice find that you have some children who are very ready to share this, who's got a story to share, and it's maybe always the same hand coming up, and then you're a bit conscious that there's a child in the corner maybe who hasn't contributed the last few times you've been in and they seem a little nervous? Like, how do you try to make sure that it's always a kind of an all-inclusive moment for those children who are maybe less ready to share?
And I think that's such a good point. And what we do, and this is where Vivian worked it all out. So all the answers are there, in the work that she did. But actually, she would always keep a list. And that's what we do. We keep a list of every single child and we tick when they tell a story. And we ask children to tell their stories and they can say no. And that's one of the most important things is if a child says no, you go, that's fine. You don't try and go, oh, but surely you've got a lovely story. Come and tell me your story. We don't do any of that coercing. We just go, that's fine. And I saw Vivian doing that in that trip I took to America. A boy was there and he was hovering around where she was taking stories. And she turned to him and said, would you like to tell a story? And he was like, no. And she said, that's all right. You can be a story listener. And a few days, by the end of the 3 days, he told a story and he was happy to. And I've seen it myself where I think sometimes we worry so much that we try and persuade children and that can make them go cold. But also, on the other hand of that, I think we mustn't write children off and go, she doesn't talk, he never says anything, they're not going to get involved. And we keep asking. And actually, when you do that, you give children agency to know no means no, and that it's all right to say no. So they can go, no, don't want to do that. And then you're not in there trying to beg them, oh, please, you know, you were doing lovely stories earlier. It's just like going, okay, that's fine. And I did that. There was a selective mute I was working with in a classroom. Always, nope, not telling my story, no. But I kept asking her, and it went on for weeks. I was there for across the year, and about 2 months in, every time, because I'd got it on my list, I knew that she hadn't told a story that. I go, do you want to tell a story today? No. And then the next time, do you want to tell a story today? No, that's fine. She'd get in the acting out. She'd join in there. And then one day she came up to me and she went, princess, and then ran off. And then when she got up on stage, she walked around like a princess, very confidently. And the teachers were like, wow, you know, this. But actually, I do really believe if I'd have been trying to make her tell her story, but I'm also not, you know, not forgetting about her or writing her off either. And I think it's that balance that's really important.
It must be all you can do to just not burst into tears in that moment when after 2 months she finally comes over and says something. I mean, how do you stay in control of your own emotions in that moment when you finally have a big breakthrough like that?
It's really interesting because you're right. I often talk about that. It's like fireworks exploding inside of me. I go, yeah. And you have to be ultra cool because the minute you go, yes, in front of the child, you know, it's big enough for them. But I think that is part of what we need to learn to do. It's sort of like we do need to actually hold. We can go in the staff room when there's no one else around and go, yes. Or, you know, sort of for me, I'll come home and be so excited. But we can't. I just think sometimes that can be too big for a child when they've made that bigger thing. But you're right. It's fireworks literally inside.
Something that's occurring to me, actually, as we're talking, is there's so much excellent kind of safeguarding practice going on underneath all of the kind of, you know, literacy and communication and connection and acting that, like, you know, supporting children to have agency and recognize that their no is respected is excellent. Like making sure that we're really listening carefully and that children know that their words are worth something. When they talk to us, we really care about what they're saying. And the reason why it's so important is because, you know, there's a statistic that, you know, children try and disclose something awful happening to them, something like 5 times plus, before they really get the attention of an adult who will listen to them. And, you know, giving that message early on that we really deeply care what you have to say and what you want to talk about is a fantastic foundation for, helping children protect themselves and share important things that are happening to them. Like, you know, it's deeper than just, you know, sharing a positive story. There could be, other sorts of things that children need to share. And, you know, this practice is really reinforcing that we want to hear it.
And also, I think it's validating children's place within the community of the classroom as well, within the group, within, you know, that because other children see that we value every story, that's so important. And there was a group of children that I was working with in reception. I went into year 1 with them and into year 2. So I tracked them for my book, The Growth of a Storyteller. And then COVID hit. And so I wasn't able to, I literally halfway through year 2, I stopped working with them. So I revisited them at the end of year 3 and did some work with them then. And then, you know, sort of life got back to normal. And then they've just recently finished as year 6. And I went and did a few sessions with them in year 6 on their memories of helicopter stories. And I'd still got their books. So I gave them copies of their books to look at, and they were looking at stories that they told. And they were talking, and they were so connected as a group which I really feel like had happened over that time of acting out, becoming a community. If you're a community of actors, you have to get on. And one of the boys said to me that sometimes in the class there might be a child, this is a year 6, but he said when you were doing helicopter stories, there might be a child you didn't like or you weren't getting on with or you'd had an argument. But when we acted out our stories, we all came together. We were all part of the same thing and it didn't matter. You would act with them. And I think that's huge, because what story does is it really does impact our brains. It really does make us emotionally intelligent. It changes the way that we see things, because we get to step into different roles and try them out. And because children don't choose who acts in their story with them, we do everything by going around the stage. They actually get to play baddies, or they get to play different characters that they might not ever experience. They choose what character they are. That's really important. You get to cast yourself. But then we take everyone else going around the stage, and that means that you've got children taking on roles that aren't like, oh, you're always the king, or you're always the baddie, or you don't ever get involved because we don't really like you. We all get involved. We all take it in turns.
I love that. No casting directors in helicopter stories. I think that's the key. Julia, I was just thinking, after we're done filming the podcast, I've got no idea what we're doing the rest of the week. What's the plan?
What a surprise. Well, I've been using Family's activity planner. So basically, you can add custom sections for all the different things you're going to be doing. You can add some activities from the shared activity library, or you can add your own. You can share it with the rest of your team and the parents, so everybody knows all of the fun you're going to be having. And if you're doing activities like face painting or going for a walk, you can check children's permissions right there on the planner page.
Pretty cool. Hold on, let me have a look.
Yeah.
Well, I can see here you've got me on the mud kitchen. We're going to have to have a chat about that. I've got these new trainers.
No. Okay, so you can find out more at family.co.
Hold on, Jude, but we need to talk about this. I'm really interested in digging into, maybe just like being really specific about how you run through things for the listeners. But before we move on to that, I do want to follow up on Julia's story. It made me think, we've talked a lot about how it's really important you scribe the work specifically and don't correct the grammar, and it's really specifically that you follow the child's interests in the story. Have you ever found yourself, or do you have any advice for when maybe a child brings up something that feels a bit like a disclosure and something that you might need to act on, or as part of their story they maybe bring something up that you feel like for whatever reason is probably not appropriate to act out in front of the wider class? Is there sometimes where you do need to censor those stories, and how do you recommend practitioners and educators go about that?
I often get asked this. It doesn't happen that often. And I think because children know that their stories are being acted out, I think that might be the reason why it doesn't happen that often. You might get something that makes you question, a boy who, there's difficult relationships, tells a story, daddy is a monster, and then is daddy a monster? We're playing monsters, or, but actually you can act that out safely, but you can also have that, and that can go on their record, and you follow your normal procedures. I think if ever there was anything, then you could use that as a time to talk to the child, and you would follow your normal procedures within that. But actually, I do find it's rare. I've had stories where a child's told their dad died, and they actually told the story of the funeral, and then the class acted that out. I've had children a child told the story of a plane going to crash into the building, and all the people died, and the firemen came and put out the fire. And it was the anniversary of September the 11th was coming up, and they told that story. And we acted it out, and I was scared. And when I get scared like that, I go, trust the child, trust the child, trust the child. And in my head, I literally let that mantra run. And so I said to the child in that instance, what character are you going to be? And he said, I want to be the plane. And I'm like, I'm really nervous because I'm wondering whether it's going to be like make fun of what's happened or trivialize or something. You know what I mean? So there was a worry there, but I'm going, trust the child. So I asked one more question before we actually took it to the stage to act it out. And I said, how are you going to be the plane? And he showed me, and he sort of like held his arms out, walked across the stage and then curled up in a ball. The minute I saw that, I went, no, this is fine. This is fine. I can cope with this. It was the most moving piece of theatre I have ever seen, and a tribute to all those people who died in September the 11th. And the children acted it out with such care, and they were walking around the stage, the people were hurt, and then all the people got to die, and the children all lay down on the stage, and then the other children got up to be the firemen, putting out the firefighters, putting out the fire, and they were walking amongst, stepping over these children lying on the stage. And I mean, it was sort of like really so powerful. And all of us, children, adults, this was a reception classroom, all of us were like, you could feel the energy and the power. And then one child turned around and said, can we do it again? Can we do it again? And I went, I'm really interested. Why do you want to do it again? And she looked at me and she said, because it was really interesting. And I just sort of like, and so we acted it out again and it was exactly the same. But I do think children see all this stuff going on. And, you know, sort of around that time, you know, and the anniversary, those images, I mean, even saying it now, we all remember those images. We all have them. We all feel that. So, of course, it's going to come up in children's stories. And I'd far rather that I saw that, I knew that, I could help, we could move on to talk about it more, I can work with that. And that's a huge benefit. People who do helicopter stories tell me that they get to know their children better than ever because of taking that time. And you see the wonder, you see the things they care about, but you also see the fears and the things they're exposed to.
It's fascinating how often those sort of subjects we're more sort of squeamish about them as adults, and we think, you know, it's us that has those that discomfort and that worry and that fear, whereas for children, you know, obviously they have an ability to understand morality, but it's us who apply kind of, you know, that weird emotion, like talking about death and dying. You know, children are a lot more neutral about those sorts of things, whereas as adults we're sort of hush hush, oh dear, no, you know. So it's so interesting that they can use this storytelling as a way to process those events and those feelings. And it's definitely us as adults that need to kind of get over our hang-ups, I suppose. And like you say, trust the child.
Death just appears in stories, you know, stories, people die, and, you know, children will die, and they'll often go, and then he died, and then he was alive again. So it's almost, if children can't cope with it, what I find is they'll go to the threshold and then they bounce, but they make it all right again. You know, they lock the door with 1,000 sellotapes, was in one story that I got told. And, you know, it's just like they can escape because they understand pretend. I think as adults, we don't understand pretend as well.
I think it's really probably helpful for people who are on some part of their journey around doing this kind of work that you admitted that you were really scared. Like, I think that's a really powerful thing, because I think we all know that moments in our work, whatever that work is, where we feel a bit scared about what we're doing. And it's so important in, I think, any form of work, but especially with young children, that you manage those emotions and maybe realize that could be the fact that you feel scared might be because something really special is about to happen, and manage that it might be about how I feel rather than about how the children are feeling. And I think that was really telling in the way you told that story.
Definitely. And I think Vivian Gussin-Paley, you know, because she was my mentor, I learned from the best, really. But she was completely, if you read her book, she is reflecting all the time on what the children are doing and how she can support them and how she can support them with the stories and in every way. And I just think... And she would go to the children and ask them. She would say, you know, we're having real problems tidying up. What can we do? And the children would come up with answers. And then she'd go, their answers are all like, let's magic it away. And that's not what I want. But she'd really try and kind of like, but she'd request all the time. She'd be questioning, how can I do this? How can I support this? And I think that's what being a reflective practitioner is, isn't it? Is going, how can we help? She'd ask, how can we help? So-and-so's really struggling. There was a boy in The Boy Who Would Be a Helicopter book that she wrote who wouldn't sit still, and he would just run onto the stage. And she said to the children, you know, this is difficult. What could we do? And the children said, build him a heliport. And so they brought some bricks up and he had a heliport. And so his helicopter could stay there. And then it was all right. And actually, sometimes those fantasy ways, and I think that's it. I think for me, where I feel safe with children is I don't have to have all the answers. Once you get over the fact that you don't, you know, I don't need to know it all. I kind of just need to sort of listen and ask. It is actually a lot easier. Yeah,
it's so interesting. It reminds me of a conversation we were having yesterday, Julia, about like phubbing, as in ignoring children by being on your phone. Because we have a chat with a family, you know, people, our customers use our product to message back parents back and forth, and to write things down and look at children's progress and make observations. And sometimes we have people say, oh, well, the parents are a bit worried about other practitioners, or the educators, spending too much time on the tablets and so on. And we were discussing about how a really key part of it is involving children in that process. I'm writing something out for your mummy, or, you know, I'm sending a photo to dad. Is there something you want to say? Or, you know, explaining those things, and that makes everything you do part of that learning process. And I don't know, for me, a light bulb just went off in my head when you told that story of we're struggling to tidy up. Do you guys have any ideas? Like, I think educators could be more brave around involving the children in the problems that they're having, because they might get some unhelpful answers, but they might also get the answer that they've been looking for along the way.
Yes, and it's just another voice in the classroom, isn't it? But why do we ignore it? It's a huge voice in the room.
I wanted to ask a bit more actually about being an audience member. For the boy who would be a helicopter, a helipad is a great way that he could participate in being sort of an audience member. But for a lot of children, they might not have experienced a performance before. They might not be familiar with what it is to be an audience member. How do you introduce that idea to children who aren't familiar?
The thing about helicopter stories is that it's like a three-legged stool. So children will be audience, actor, and storyteller. So they actually get to take on each of those roles. And they're not any of them for a long time. And helicopter stories happens in the round. So we sit in a circle around the stage, and children will have we'd introduce it by I'd just bring some stories that I'd already had been told by other children. So literally to do an intro session so they know what's happening. So I'd have a story. There was a dog. Can you come up and be the dog? Can I see how the dog moves around the stage? So literally they're sort of sat there for a minute and then they're there. The dog saw some lions. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Come and be the lions. Let's see how the lions are moving. So they I don't need to go, now you're audience, now you're this, now you're that. We seamlessly move through. And if they go no, it's like, that's okay. And we just move on to the next person and continue around. So I'm a great believer that children are constantly seeing things they don't understand. And they, the whole world is like, what's this? What's this? So they kind of quite good at just winging it. And I sort of think that's what happens is they go, okay, this is where we are. And I kind of at each stage, I go, these are stories that other children have told me. We're going to act them out. I don't explain what that means. They just get up. And then I do lots of what I call asks. And the asks are the way we support children. Can I see how the dog walks around the stage? Can I see you being the dinosaur stomping? And children start to move because they're questions they understand. And just, sorry, to add on to that, when I say questions they understand, I have seen people going, what do you think a princess looks like? And I see children don't move. And the reason they don't, that's quite hard. That's kind of like an adult question. What do you think a princess looks like? You'd have to go, so then you'd have to get a mental picture of what a princess looks like. And then you'd have to go, how do I physically make my body? We're doing quite a lot of brain steps, aren't we? Until maybe you might go like that. but I don't think many children will. They'd sort of be like, I don't know. Whereas, can you show me how the princess walks around the stage? They can do it immediately. And that's what, for me is the asks, is how we teach the asks. It's very precise language that asks for an action.
I love that. It's a top tip. Do you know what? That question was an example of me not trusting the children. You've trained me there to better assume that they will be able to take part in it. I shouldn't worry that they don't know how to be an audience. That's an excellent little reflection there, I think.
Julia, the moment we've all been waiting for, preparing for all day, I think it's time we do we give a helicopter story a go, isn't it? Are you ready?
I would love to give it a try, actually. Hold on, let me put my cards down.
Okay, so I'm going to be the storyteller.
And I will scribe your story. So I've got paper here. It's got your name at the top, probably in reverse. but yeah, so would you like to tell me your story? Your story can be as short as you like, but it can't be any longer than the bottom of my page.
So the other day, I went to the park.
The other day, I went to the park. And I'm writing it down as I say the words.
And there was an elephant there.
And there was an elephant there.
And he was very married.
And he was very married.
Shout out to Bethany.
Because he could do all sorts of flips.
Because he could do all sorts of flips.
The end.
Fantastic. Okay, so I've written your story down. I'll read it back out to you. The other day I went to the park and there was an elephant and he was very married because he could do all sorts of flips. When we act it out, are you going to be yourself, Matt, or are you going to be the elephant?
I think I'm going to be myself.
Who could have predicted?
I'm going to need some kind of other person to be the elephant, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't it lucky there are two other people who can be in this? I could be one as well. No, I won't get involved. The other day, I went to the park. Matt, can I see you stand up and pretend you're walking to the park?
I have to stand up while I'm still in frame. Okay.
And there was an elephant there. Julia, can you be the elephant for me? And can you show me how an elephant might move?
Am I still on camera?
You're doing brilliantly. And he was very married. Let's see this elephant walking around being very happy because he's very married. Because he could do all sorts of flips. Can you show me yourself? Pretend that you can do all sorts of flips. Let's pretend.
Hold on.
And let's clap. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very, very
Fantastic.
good. Michael can do all sorts of magic in post. He can make you do flips and stuff.
Yeah, the children don't get that benefit. I've got the special effects and editing.
We can use CGI in the podcast.
But it's also pretend. That word pretend. It, sort of if a child there's a horse and he was riding the horse, I'd go, can you pretend you're riding the horse? Because you've got one child on all fours and another child sits on them. There's bloody noses, but we're pretending. Can you pretend?
Yeah.
And then children tend to sort of straddle and pretend. Currency of childhood is pretend. They do understand that word.
As stressful as I know that was for Julia, I think that was actually so instructive because that was the thing I really noticed was how clear you were in the first bit. This is what I'm going to do. But actually, it was almost like you noticed the moments of potential tension in the acting out of the story and you sort of got ahead of them and were more clear in those moments. Like, for example, it was kind of obvious that you knew Julia was maybe not quite sure how to act out that she was very married. And so you were sort of said, imagine you're happy, like you're very... So you're kind of adding to that story and maybe bringing children more comfortable. And I thought that was really instructive for the educators out there listening.
Yes, because if I just said, Julie, act like you're very married, I don't know, I can't do it. I always go, can I do it? So it's, sort of, if I can't do it, then how would they? I've seen people say to children, can you be a park? And you see children go like, how do you be a park? You can be a swing, you can be a tree, but being a park, it's too big. It's too many things, isn't it? And I kind of go, you need to really think, you can be a door, you can be objects, and children do take on all of those roles. But if you're being a park, you can't do it. It just, your brain just, how it's too many. It's too much. But it's a shop. So can you be the shopkeeper? There, you know what I mean? So it's so important. I think that's where I say the complexity is. Once you know that and once you understand that, it's actually very easy. But it is just rethinking. And I think, for me, because of my theatre background, I really understand that. And when I saw Vivian, I really understood. I think she was an amazing theatre practitioner as well as an early years practitioner, because she really got how play works. And that's all it is. It's playing.
I also love that we've miraculously managed to come back to a kind of classic Tiny Chair podcast theme, where we realise that as educators, we've got to reflect on what we're asking of the children that we know we wouldn't ask of ourselves, or isn't possible to ask of ourselves. And this is an example, with the best will in the world, I couldn't act out being a park. I tried. It was very hard. You can't do it. And so, having that reflection of okay, I'm asking them to do this, but can this be done? Could I do it? Is a brilliant reflection, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
I think that has all in been so wonderful, Trisha. I've learned so much, and so great that we got to act that in the end. I think before we go on to hear a little bit as a final point about where people can find out more about you and work with you, I wondered if, just as a final question from me, was, you've spoke so touchingly about Vivian and the impact that she had on your life as your friend and as your mentor. Is there anything that you'd like to leave our viewers and listeners about Vivian and about her legacy that you'd like them to know about?
I think what I got most from Vivian was how reflective she was, how she would never take the easiest answer. She always wanted to know why. And she would often talk about how the most important people in the room are the children, and that's it. And sometimes I think, when I first saw her working with those children, I realised straight away that I was the adult that got in the way. And actually, I think as adults, we can get in the way of children's learning, and it's about, I think, and I know people love acting and all of that, but I go, do a drama class, when you're in school, or when we're in preschool, when we're working with children. It's about them. This is their moment. This isn't about me being big. It's about actually seeing what the children do and actually listening to them. And I think that's the biggest thing that I got from Vivian. I mean, she moved me. Her letters moved me all the time, because constantly she'd shine a different light. And it's always being prepared to look deeper, to go deeper, to try and understand what's actually happening for every child, and caring about every child, I think.
It's a really touching tribute. Thanks you for sharing that, Trisha.
Love that.
Where can the listeners go and find out if they loved the story of the helicopter stories today and they want to work with you, or they want to find out more? Where can people go and find out about you, Trisha?
So we have two websites. The Make Believe Arts website is the website for the charity, because we are a registered charity. But the main website is helicopterstories.co.uk. And we have a story community that's our mailing list that people can join. It's like helicopterstories.co.uk/join or /join. So they can join there, and they will get sort of twice weekly emails from me, stories children have told me, my reflections on all of that. And also we sometimes run free events. We are a charity. So our aim is about trying to get every child to have access to helicopter stories, to a rich story environment. That's what we want. That's what's important to us. The other thing, I am literally just about to launch a YouTube channel called The Listening Classroom, and I will be posting I hope, once a week from February. So, so the listening channel, join there, and, sort of hopefully I will be posting and really I want to be sharing this stuff that I know, the stories I hear, the same kind of things that we're talking about here, but also how the brain impacts, how stories impact our brain, and what's happening in our brain when we hear stories. Because I think once we know that, we can justify why this stuff is important. And I think we all need that so much now. We need to be able to go, no, this is right. This is why this matters.
Here, yeah.
I know what I'm going to be doing after the podcast, Julia. I'm going straight to helicopterstories.co.uk/join. And I'm joining that mailing list. And then I'm going over to YouTube and I'm getting subscribed to Trisha's wonderful work. So we'll put all those links below. If today's anything to go by, I know that YouTube channel is going to be a success, Trisha. So thank you for sharing that. And thank you for spending time with us today.
Thank you.
Gee whiz. Oh, hold on. I should have done like a helicopter sound. Like that would have been a good
That's
intro.
a helicopter. All right. Okay.
Does that? No, vaguely. Sounds like a helicopter to me.
I'm being generous, I think.
Yeah, that's fair. That was all-time episode for me, Julia. I loved Trisha. She was great.
Do you know what? I'm so excited about the technique as well. I hope everybody listening as well has kind of got enough with all her explanations and the fact that, we even had a go, that they can try this in their rooms or their classrooms and see the magic for themselves.
I hope so too. I'm already excited to do some helicopter stories with my little one when she's old enough. I think that's going to be so fun. And I think one of the nice things that the learnings for me was probably that, like, Trisha explained through some of the emotions of her as the educator, and when she explained that she was feeling really scared, and I hope that's made people also feel like it's okay to feel tension during some of these moments, but it shouldn't stop you going for it.
Absolutely. And I thought it was so poignant, her saying that you don't have to have all of the answers. Like you can, do things because you want to try and you want to experiment, and you don't necessarily have to get it right every time. And there's so many facets of early years practice where that applies, like when you're doing risky play and you're doing everything you can to sort of not say be careful or get down or whatever, and you really want to sort of let the children experience that element of risk, but as an adult you're thinking, oh god, this is an accident form waiting to happen. So there's so often that we need to reflect as adults on our own kind of biases and emotions towards something.
I thought it was so poignant, the story she told about when she had a boy who was being a helicopter and it was starting to become quite disruptive.
That was Vivian Gusson-Paley's story.
Vivian told the children, this is becoming a bit disruptive, what should we do? And they came up with the idea of creating a helipad, which, let's be honest, no adult would have come up with, but it was the perfect solution. That for me is like amazing early years practice in action.
Absolutely. I love that. Now, we don't have a cheers to the early years this week. I don't know what's been going on. Obviously there's amazing practice happening all over the place, so if you're particularly proud of your team, if you're doing something amazing, or you just want to say thank you or well done, ping us a message, tinytedpodcast@family.co, and we will read it out.
Well, that's it. If you want to support the podcast, go and follow us on social media, Family HQ, across everything, and give us a like and a 5-star review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all that kind of stuff, because it helps other people find it. Julia, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your Thursday.
You too.
Formal end. I'll go back to my helicopter sounds.